Thank you for coming to the session all. My name is Ajay Anandan. I'm a senior program manager in the Power BI team. I work on administration, governance, and distribution, mainly for large-scale audiences, right? That's my primary focus. And in this session, we're going to cover details about how you can plan your Power BI deployments, right? We're going to talk about even small-scale deployments and large-scale deployments as a whole, okay? Before we start, just a show of hands, right? How many of you say you are administrators? You do some kind of governance, you administrate Power BI, okay, great. How many of you don't administrate but just create content and distribute it to people? Okay, so let's do that. And how many of you just consume the content that other people share with you? Okay, that's what I expected. Okay, so mostly people who administer and some content creators. That is great. In this session, I'm going to cover 3 things, right? Forget that I have the clicker. The 3 takeaways, right? Number 1, understanding your scenarios. We see a lot of deployments in customers as part of the Power BI team, right? And we always see 3 patterns. And we are going to cover all those 3 patterns today. And for each of those patterns, we're going to talk about, hey, which components do you want to use, what works best, and how you can set it up. We're also going to talk about some of the licensing implications. You all heard about the premium announcement yesterday. So we're going to talk about which kind of licensing and which mix do you want to use, because that's a question we get a lot. After that, we're going to take it up a notch, and we're going to talk about how you can manage your content lifecycle once you've deployed it to a large audience, right? And finally, we are going to talk about how you can measure your impact and how you can improve on your deployment. So what do you need to focus on? And I have one more slide talking about the juicy stuff, which is the roadmap of what is coming in the next 6 months. Okay. Before I go into even the deployment scenarios, right? Yesterday I had a session on governance and administration. Not sure how many of you were there. But many of the questions I got after the session was about this new functionality called apps that we released, right? How many of you have tried it, and how many of you understand what apps are, kind of in this crowd? Okay, so a bunch of them, and some of you say this. So I wanted to take some time today, right? I added a set of slides yesterday night to talk about what apps are, show you what they are first, because they are very critical to our distribution story going forward. And I want to talk about how they work, what you use it for, and where we are taking it, right? So let's start with that primer, and then we'll go into the different deployment scenarios, okay? So as part of the apps release, this was released May 3rd, right? And I'll show you a demo of what it is. We released 2 pieces. We released a thing called apps, and we renamed workspaces into app workspaces. And I'll talk through the reasons of why we did that and where we are taking that forward. But let's start with just workspaces, right? We intend workspaces just for creation, okay? It's the place where content gets created in Power BI. I have 2 kinds of workspaces. You have your My Workspace, which is a scratchpad, right? It's just for you. It's a scratchpad. Do not use that for any deployments, right? Because many of the admin and governance features that we are working on are not going to be for My Workspace. It's going to be for the app workspaces. So any kind of deployment that you do for more than like 2 or 3 people, create an app workspace, right? Once you have a pro license, it doesn't cost you anything to create an app workspace, so just go create it. I want to be very, very clear on that. Now, the reason, let me just go to the next slide, and I'll talk about apps, and then I'll talk about why we did this, right? So as I said, you start with a app workspace, okay? And it's usually done by an admin. When I mean an admin, I'm not talking about the Power BI admin or the global administrator, but every workspace has an admin for itself, right? These are the people who manage the workspace, who manage who gets access to the workspace, right? They create the workspace, and then they add a bunch of authors to the workspace, right? And authors these are content creators. They go create, they go create the dashboards and the reports. And once they create the dashboards and the reports, they publish it out as an app. That's our intent, right? So the app is nothing but the published version of the workspace, okay? It's not a separate concept. It's one-to-one map to the workspace. It is just the published version. And your end viewers consume the published version. Now, what does this give you? Content creators can make changes to the content in the app workspace without affecting what their end users see, right? So you would create like 10 dashboards, let's say, right, and you publish it out. Your end users start using those 10 dashboards. Now you can go and start editing the 10 dashboards, right, and work on your next iteration without affecting what they are seeing right now, right? It gives you one level of staging right there. And that's it. That's what an app is, right? It's basically a published version of a workspace. It's one-to-one mapped, okay? And here's the reason we did that. How many of you have consumers or have end users for your Power BI deployment where they want a very, very simplistic view? They don't want all the frills and everything. All they want is directly get to their content. Maybe they interacted with it a little bit, and that's it. They want to get out. They don't even know what Power BI is. They don't care. All they want to look at is data. How many of you have these like very, very simplistic consumers? There you go, right? Quite a few. This is happening a lot more. And in the first incarnation of Power BI, we had workspaces, right? Call them group workspaces. And both consumption and creation mostly took place there, right? Inside the workspace. Now, over time, what's happening is for consumers, we want to keep it very, very simple, okay? We want to make it really easy for them to get to their data and then get out. For creators, right, we want to give them a lot more power. We want to give them a lot more flexibility, right? So what happens is there's a lot of options that we need to add, a lot of configuration settings that we need to add, right? So it looks pretty complicated for authors, right? But authors are fine. They understand this, right? They use the system. They live inside the system. But that complexity doesn't make sense for your consumers. So we made a conscious choice to draw a line between, hey, what is the consumption experience of Power BI and what is the maker experience of Power BI, right? And that's the line right there. So anything on the other side of publish is for consumers, and everything in the workspace is for creators. Right now, this distinction, you can see that, but you don't see that much of a difference between these two. In the next 6 months, with some of the options we are going to add, the workspaces are going to become a lot more complicated, but the apps, the published apps themselves, will be very, very simple to consume, right? We will keep it that way going forward, and I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So now I want to do a quick switch and show you guys a demo of apps and what I'm talking about here, right? The consumption view and the creation view, and why they're going to be different. So let me switch to my machine here. Also, a quick show of hands here. We released a new navigation also on May 4th, right? New left navigation. How many of you like it? Oh, somebody claps. How many of you hate it? It could be, you can say that, okay. Okay, good. So I released the new nav as well. The one thing is, we shipped it to like more than 500,000 people at the same time, but we didn't get any feedback, which is a good thing, because when you switch the navigation, people don't give you feedback, it's actually good, because typically it's usually bad. So I just wanted to see how many of you guys thought what it is. So if you look at the nav, right, before, I'm in the app section, but let's look at the nav a little bit. You see favorites, you see recents, you see apps, you see shared with me, right? And the color is slightly darker there, and you see a distinction, right? After shared with me, you should see a small color distinction, right? And you see workspaces, that's a switcher, and then you have my workspace, and you can go into other workspaces. There is a reason that there is a line, right? What just happened? Oh, man. Oh, man. Okay. Thank God, came back. Nervous moments, right? And I skipped my coffee today, so. So the first 4 sections are meant for consumers, right? It's going to be very, very simple, and we're going to keep it that way going forward. Workspaces, as I mentioned, that's where all the options and the bells and whistles, the frills are going to be there, right? Any new things that we introduce, all the myriad of configurations that I'm planning to put into the product are all going to be there. And your consumers don't even need to know about it, right? They will use only the top 4 portions of, top 4 sections of Power BI. And we are introducing a setting in the admin portal, right? I'll talk about that in the roadmap as well, where you can turn off workspaces for your end users, right? Users who just consume won't even see workspaces and my workspace. All they will see is favorites, recents, apps shared with me, and that's all they need to know. They don't even need to know how this gets created. All they need to know is there is data, I consume the data, I get my insights, and I get out and do my daily job, right? That is where we want to keep it. Now, let's talk about apps for a second. So they're shared with me. You could share individual dashboards, right? So let's say you had a workspace in the past, and you had like 20 dashboards, 30 to 40 reports, pretty common. We see that often. And then you want to distribute that to your users. How do you do that? Right? We've seen two approaches that people take before. They either create one dashboard and put a link to everything else on that dashboard and share that dashboard out. But in many cases, people just share like 20 dashboards, right? And then your end users have to remember which dashboards have what, and they need to remember the names. And so many of our content creators resort to having prefixes, right? Hash, sales, underscore, something. Hash, sales. How many of you guys do that? Put prefixes. Okay, some of you here. In many of our biggest deployments, we see that a lot. So we want to solve that with apps, right? So in this case, this is, I'm a consumer now, right? Not a creator. Let's look at the creator view in a second. I'm a consumer, and I'm a marketing manager, right? That's my persona. I'm a marketing person, marketing VP or whatever. I'd like to be a VP someday. So I have like an app on my conversion metrics. I have, hey, my lead lifecycle. How's my social media doing? And I'm paying for ads to Facebook. How is my ad campaign doing? Those are the 4 apps I have. Now let's go into the first app. The first app is conversion metrics. Some team built it for me, right? Some analytics team. They probably report to me, or they report to somebody else. I don't care. All I know is I come to Power BI. There's a file called conversion metrics, and I go inside. And in this case, I need to zoom out a little bit. And in this case, they created a dashboard for me to land on, right? I don't even care. All I go in, I see data, I consume the data, and I click on the tiles. It takes me to different places within the app. Here you go. They configured a link. I don't know where these things come from, but I just consume it, right? Now, if I want to see all the dashboards and reports inside this app, right, and the author could have multiple dashboards and reports inside this app, there's this small button called Content List. So I click it, and here you go. All the dashboards and reports that are part of this app are here. So this is the first step in terms of organization that we are going towards, right? Many of you asked for folders. How many of you would like folders again? There you go. There you go. Many of you have asked for folders, and this is our first step in getting there. You will see more advancements in that area soon. But you can bundle up all related content into an app and push it to users, and they consume it as one coherent group, right? Now, in some cases, in this case, they landed me on a dashboard by default, right? But some other teams have a different use case. They just want me to land on the list and make me choose the dashboard. You can do that as well. So the team that built this app for Facebook apps, when I open it, they just landed me on the list, right? It's just a configuration. I don't know how they set it, but all I know is I have a list. I know which one I want to open, and I just consume it, right? It's that simple. And that's all I need to know. I don't need to know anything else about where this comes from. Now, I can favorite apps as well, right? And in favorites, I can have a list of favorite dashboards, reports. It's like one list. Similar with recents, all my apps. So the apps we just opened show up here, right? So it's very easy to consume. So now let's look at how you can create one of these. So as I mentioned, apps are just the published view of the app workspace, right? It's very important to get that concept right. So let me go into the conversion metrics, the app that we see here. Let's go into that workspace. It has a corresponding workspace. That's where it comes from. In this case, I am both the consumer and the creator, right? Now I'm turning into the creator persona. In reality, it will be 2 different people. So if I'm the marketing VP, I will just have the app. I will not have access to the actual workspace where the things are getting created, right? And but in this case, I have access to both because I created both. So I'm switching into the workspace. And you can see that this is your typical workspace view. You have dashboards, reports, and data sets. And the way you publish an app is very, very simple, right? You hit this button would say Publish App when you start. Now, since the app is already published, you have an Update App button. So I just hit Update App, choose some color, choose some icons and everything, and then I go choose where I want my users to land when they open the app. This is where it's configured, right? I can say, hey, I want them to land in this particular dashboard, right? This is my home dashboard, and I want them to always land here. Or I can say, hey, none, and it will just land them on the list. Okay, and then finally, I can give access to my whole organization, or I can just give access to specific groups or individuals, right? So if it's the marketing division, I just create a security group for marketing, and I can share it with just marketing. Now that's an important thing here, right? I want to stress that again. You can share an app with a security group, right? So you can add content in a workspace and distribute it out to a security group today using apps. Because one of the main questions we get from our field when they go sell to customers is, hey, I want to add people, I want to add security groups to my workspaces, and I cannot do that yet. You can, right? If it's your consumers who are on the security group, publish an app, put a security group in there, and they can consume the app. So let's try to publish this app and see how my end users get it. So I say update app. The first time you do it, it will be publish app. Spinning. So the publishing process takes a little bit of time, right? But I get a link. All I need to do is copy this link and send it to my consumers, right? They click the link, and it will automatically install this app, install the corresponding app, and land them there. That's another way for them to find these apps. They can go to the apps tab, hit get more apps. So any apps that you publish to them automatically gets published to app source, which is kind of a gallery, right? And it's based on the permissions, right? If you publish an app for all members of your organization, anybody who goes here in your organization will see the app. If it's only for a specific security group, only that set of people will be able to see the app when they go to the gallery, right? So all this access controls and security works here as well. So if we search for our app, this is our test environment, so we have Abracadabra and all these apps, but so let's search for conversion metrics. There you go, right? I had 2 apps on this. I have another test app, so that's what you see. So you just hit the get button and it installs as usual. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover about apps as a primer. Important distinction: sharing is still going to be in the product. Apps are going to be the future of distribution. Now, content packs get interesting, right? Many of you might use content packs for distribution. What content packs allowed you to do is take a subset of your workspace and package it up and put it out to customers. When they install it, it installs in a workspace. It was a confusing experience, but many of you use it, many of you are accustomed to it. Over time, apps will be superseding content packs, right? I want to be very, very clear on that. Apps are going to supersede content packs, but content packs have a number of use cases today, right? That our preview version of apps, we are not yet there. We know some of you want personalization, which is what content packs do very well. We know it's very important to you, and we are going to bring that to apps as well in a much, much better way than what existed in content packs. So we are working on all these features. Everything content packs did, apps will do much, much better, right? So if you do not have any need for the specific features of content packs today, you should pick apps, because that's where we are going. Okay, now let me switch back to my deck. Great. So now that we got the basics of what app workspaces and apps are, let's talk about the deployment scenario, the typical deployment scenarios that happen now. Okay. The first scenario is a small-sized BI team, right? A few individuals. It's like 5, 10 people, 15 people, small team. They just want to collaborate. They just want to create some reports and then consume it. It's mostly they want freedom, they want speed, they want agility. We see this a lot in the self-service scenarios when, in a big organization, just one team starts using Power BI desktop, they really like it, they want to share out the results. So how can they do that? So in this case, they would start with the source data either on the cloud or on-prem, and they would pull it into desktop using Power Query, and then create data sets and reports. And if they have on-premise data sets, they would typically configure a gateway. But small teams, we don't see that often, but it's optional. And here's how you should set it up in these cases, right? Once you push it into the Power BI service, which is the way to collaborate and share, you would create a workspace. Okay, that's where all these files reside. Now, my workspace is grayed out there because, once again, I highly recommend you against using my workspace for anything other than anything other than scratch purposes, right? Do not use it for even small teams. Create an app workspace. Doesn't cost you that much. It's nothing. So just go create an app workspace, right? It's much better. And once you create an app workspace, right? What you would do, you would either add all your members to the app workspace because it's a small team. You don't care if everybody edits the data, or if you really want to share them out, just take individual dashboards and share them out. That's the easiest way to go for small teams. So don't use content packs or apps or anything for these scenarios, right? Just share the individual dashboards out. Once you do that, end users will be able to consume it in your mobile applications, right? It just works. They can also do analyze in Excel, right? That's a cool feature. Not many people know about this. A lot of companies use Excel, right? They like to analyze data in Excel because it's something that they're used to, and it's been around for years. What you can do is you can create a Power BI report, right, on a dashboard on an underlying data set, share it to the end users, and if they want to do more analysis on that, they can analyze the data in Excel. That's a functionality available in Power BI, right? It's really cool. And for the larger corporate scenarios, that's going to play a major role going forward. Okay, so this is your setup for small teams. Okay, just app workspace. Either add the members to the app workspace, or just ad hoc share the dashboards, like individual dashboards to these end users. Don't do anything else. Now you can publish an app if you wanted to. Now let's talk about the corporate cases, right? Big corporations, and this is like the BI-led scenario. Either BI, the BI team, or the IT team is creating a bunch of dashboards and reports, the one source of truth for your company or division, right? And you want to distribute out to like thousands of users, and you want them to consume it on an everyday basis. This is what probably most of you do. And in this case, the focus is on centrally managing the data sets and the reports in one place. You focus on accuracy, reliability, and security. And you don't want all these thousands of users to muck with the underlying reports and data sets, right? Just want them to consume and get out. In these cases, once the data sets becomes big, especially, people tend to use analysis services, either on-prem or with the new analysis services on Azure. You could pick one of those two. And then, you use desktop again. It's the same creation process. The creation process doesn't differ. But here, once you go to the Power BI service, the content creators and the administrators create an app workspace, and that's where they create everything, right? Once again, going back to the basics. That's where they create everything. And then, when they share it out, you create an app in this case. You always create an app, right, to distribute to your users. Now, if your organization has needs for personalization, so let me talk about that a little bit. I had a customer, I was talking to them. They had about 1,000 end users, right? They were trying to deploy a solution for 1,000 end users. And it is an investment bank, and most of the end users are analysts, right? And they analyze some of the data. So as you can imagine, all the thousands of users wanted to create their own custom analysis, because these guys live in numbers every day, right? So they want to do ad hoc custom analysis. And so they came to me and said, hey, look, I can't use apps. What do you suggest to me? So in that case, right, it turned out that most of them prefer to analyze in Excel, okay, because analysts and investment banks typically live in Excel, and they want to analyze in Excel, which apps do perfectly well, right? So if you publish an app, people can analyze the end data in Excel today. It works. So if that's all the personalization scenario that you want, that's great. But there is another customer of mine, right, who wanted to publish a bunch of dashboards and reports. Their end users wanted to analyze it in Power BI and create their own custom version of the reports. Okay, they wanted to drag and drop a few things and create their own custom visuals for themselves. In that case, unfortunately, today apps is not equipped to do that. As I mentioned before, we hope to do that soon. But until then, content packs are the way to go for that scenario, right? But be cognizant of the fact that they're going away, so there's going to be a migration at some point. There will be some manual work when the migration happens. We will give you advance notice. So make a conscious choice and make a trade-off there. And that's why that's a dotted line. Now, of course, all of these can be analyzed in Excel again, and apps can be consumed on your mobile devices, right? The consumption experience is actually pretty cool for apps. It's very easy. So if you have a lot of people consuming stuff in mobile, really apps are the way to go. Now the third set of scenarios we have, right, are, hey, we already have an internal portal, right, or an internal application that our users are used to going to. In Microsoft, we have our own internet portal, right? Every user knows to go there. Every new employee knows to go into that new portal. And many, many companies have these SharePoint sites built up where employees know that that's the first place they go to search information. And so they want the BI, the business intelligence dashboards and reports to be part of that internet portal or that internal application, because they don't want users to go to like another place. Users need to know about Power BI, right? They need to know how to go to Power BI. And many organizations don't want to do that. And the best way to do that is to embed Power BI inside that internet portal, right? You just take your dashboards and reports and you embed it inside your application. And the workflow would be very similar. So you would create a desktop, connect your data sources, put it in an app workspace. It's the same until then. But after that, instead of sharing out dashboards or publishing an app, you would embed the dashboards and reports in your application with the API token, right? With our APIs, with our REST APIs and the token. Okay. So these are the three scenarios we see often. The small scale scenario, just create the workspace, add people to the workspace or share it out. The corporate reporting scenario, so again, put everything in an app workspace, but publish an app. If you have personalization scenarios, publish a content pack for the time being. And finally, if you want to improve your efficiency of the workflow of end users, you don't want them to go. Don't want them to go to another portal or know another tool. Just embed it into your internet application. Okay.
So we use embedded today,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not from the Power BI service. There's a separate command line utility to post the PBIX files in the embedded workspace. Or you are showing us direct line. Is this a new?
So you can, going forward, what we are doing is we are merging the functionality, right? So you would create a workspace, you would add content in the workspace. Now you could add content manually by going into the workspace in the web, in your browser, or you have APIs to automatically like create the content in there. So you can do both, right?
This is not in place right now. What will be?
It is kind of in place because you can create a new artifact inside your workspace today. It's already there, right? So I can put.
Can I cascade it to embedded workspace directly, or?
There's nothing called an embedded workspace going forward. It's workspaces, and it's basically how you consume the workspace. That's all, right? We are just merging both of them. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Previously, you had to go to Azure and then configure everything, and you get an embedded workspace. That's going away, right? It's like a workspace. So here's our intent with the embedded, right? Every action that you're able to do in the service, you should be able to do it with our APIs. That's where we are going. And so you have the flexibility, right? Your users can use the GUI to do it, or they can just do it with REST APIs for everything. And the way we are building many of these user-facing functions is we build the APIs first, right? Make sure the APIs work. We test it out internally, and then we build the user interface on top of it. So you can just use the APIs underneath. So I'll show you one example later. We're shipping out a new API that pertains to distribution. So I'm going to talk about that. So you can do that as well. Okay. So now we talked about the components, how to set it up, and which component to use when. Let's talk about an interesting question here. What is the licensing implication of all of this, right? Many of you probably have that question, especially after the premium release yesterday. So here's the basics on licensing. You need a pro license to create stuff. Let me put it a different way. You need a pro license to create and share stuff to everybody, right? Create and sharing requires pro. Now, on the consumption side, if the content resides in premium, you can consume it with a free license. But if the content does not reside in premium, you will need a pro license, right? That's it. So let's go through all these scenarios and see how licensing applies. small teams and groups, right? There are a few users. At this point, you're not going to buy premium because it's like 10, 15 users, 20 users. So you would buy pro for all your users, right? Optionally, if you have a model that's like 2 billion rows, like what was shown in the keynote yesterday, some small section of our customers have that, you need to buy premium for those use cases, right? But if your data set is like normal size, it has like 10 million rows or something, just buy pro licenses and you'll be done, right? So 20 users, $10 a user, and you'll be done. But if you have like 2 billion rows or something, and you want these 10 users to analyze such a big data set, you would have to buy premium. It's optional. Second scenario is corporate read-only reporting, right? And this is the scenario where, let me give you a real customer example that we had recently. There was a bank, right? I'm not going to say the name of the customer. There's a BI team in the bank. There's like 2,000 employees, right? And every employee has to see a little bit of the metrics daily, right, on how they're doing and how their team is doing and everything. And this is like thousands of employees. So they want to ship out a solution where they just consume this data. All they'd go and see is, hey, how am I doing this week? How are others doing this week? How's my team doing this week? What do I need to improve, right? And they get out. They don't need to create their own views or anything. They don't do anything complex. It's just read-only consumption. And that's what we call corporate reporting, right? You want people to just consume the data, but you don't want them to do anything in advance. So in these cases, right, and so here we have a small number of authors and creators, but you have a large number of consumers, right? That's the scenario. In this case, you would buy Power BI Pro for all the creators, and you would buy instances of Power BI Premium, depending on how many users there are. You would buy sufficient number of premium capacity, and you would put all the content in there. To put the content in there, you need the Pro license, right, to share it out. And then you would publish an app, and the end users do not need a license to consume it. Okay, so all your 5,000 or 6,000 users can consume it without an end user license for themselves, right? But they can't do anything more on it. They can't analyze in Excel. They can't create their own versions of it. Nothing would work, right? They can just consume the data, pure and simple. The next scenario is large-scale self-service BI. This is similar to the stockbroker, the investment bank case I was talking about, where there were a bunch of analysts, thousands of analysts. There's a BI team who wanted to give them one source of the truth, but it's just a starting point, right? They would take those reports, and especially the data in those reports, and they would do their own analysis in Excel. In these cases, end users have to do something more than just consume the data, right? They need to analyze it, they need to explore it, they need to create their own custom versions of the data. For these cases, you need Pro for all the creators, and you need Pro for all the users who do anything more than read-only consumption. Okay, and over time, we are going to add more features here that fall into the self-service consumer category, right? For example, personalization in apps. Let's say your end users wanted to create their own version of the dashboards and reports and the apps for themselves, right? Doesn't exist today, but when it comes up, it will be in the self-service consumer scenario. And many customers have a bunch of creators, a bunch of self-service consumers, but they have a lot of read-only consumers. So in that case, you can just buy premium for the read-only people and don't bother buying a license for them, because premium will take care of it. And finally, embedded analytics, right? In these cases, you need premium. That's the way to go going forward. You'd buy premium capacity, and embedded has a lower entry point for premium. It's going to come up. So there's a lower entry point. So you would buy one of the embedded capacities, maybe with a lower entry point, put up your content in there, and embed it in your application. Okay. Any questions on this deck before we move?
You say you need a Pro license to analyze in Excel?
Yes. You can export to Excel, export data, print with the free license. But analyze in Excel means you're connecting to the live model, right, all the time. So that requires a Pro license. Export to Excel is different. There's two functionalities there.
On the corporate reporting, you mentioned you needed buy a premium license, but are you saying that you can assign premium for free, or you actually have to buy premium licenses? I thought it was a little confusing. Can you just elaborate and kind of clarify that?
Okay. So the way I like to explain premium, right? Don't take it literally, but here's the analogy. Buying premium is like buying your own computer and putting it in the Microsoft cloud, right? In the old days, you used to buy an on-prem server, you used to run software on it, right, and end users consume it. So all the resources for that software came from that PC, right? So premium is like buying a VM on the cloud, right, just for your company, and all your reporting demands, all the dashboards and reports in that capacity, right, will be powered from that VM. That's what it actually means. So what you're essentially doing is you're buying this VM in the cloud, right? You need a pro license to create content into this VM. But after you do that, we don't care. Your end users can just consume the content in the VM without a pro license, right? Yeah, I mean, but there's a limit in how many users one VM can take, right? So it'll be slow, it'll crash and everything. So you need to do the balance. You can add like a couple million users. Licensing, it won't matter from a licensing perspective, but nothing will work for them, right? So you need to do that balance.
For the on-premises with Power BI report server, which options are available? Is there any sort of ability to embed references to the on-premises capabilities? Or is it only available directly through the portal?
You can use the on-premises report server to do reports. You cannot do dashboards. Apps are not going to be available there, right, in the foreseeable future. Dashboards are not coming in the foreseeable future. So if all you need is reports, the on-premises server will work for you.
And even though that's included in premium, it is still available with Enterprise Edition and SA, right?
I'll have to check up on that piece. So let's follow up later. I'm not sure about that. Okay. There's a lot more questions on licensing. So maybe I should, let me take it at the end. I'll be at the Ask the Experts after this session. So just come and get me on all your licensing questions regarding distribution, and we'll chat about that in more detail. I want to cover a few other important things, and I have only 10 minutes to go. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is you have your deployment, you figured out the licensing, right? Now you want to manage your life cycle of the deployment. You want to create content, you want to stage your content, you want to make sure you can get back to old versions of the content. So my favorite trick here, many users don't know this, right, is use OneDrive for your desktop files. OneDrive for Business has a cool feature where when you upload a file, you can look at the old versions of the file. So every time the file gets uploaded, OneDrive automatically stores the old versions for you, right? So in this case, I uploaded a file like 10 times, and I can see the old versions here, and I can get back any other version, right? Go back to an old version. Many people ask us how can we put it in source control and all that. Today, it's not easy, but OneDrive is the most straightforward solution here. So highly encourage you to use OneDrive for business whenever you want to version your desktop files. So let's look at how you would stage your deployments, right? You would create in desktop, okay, as usual. You would put it in OneDrive for Business, right? That's the first thing you would do. Now you would go to the service. You would create a development workspace, and this is a scenario we see often, right? You want to have a development workspace, a development space, and you want to have a production space. And you want to first create everything in the development space, make sure it's all good, and then you want to move it to the production workspace. We see this in many of our larger deployments. They want to stage out the deployment. So in this case, you can do that with Power BI. Right now, there's more manual work than there ought to be. I'll talk about some of the automation options that are coming up soon. So for now, create a dev workspace. Put your reports there. This doesn't work well with dashboards yet. What many of our customers do is they publish an app out of the dev workspace. They give access to this dev workspace to only the testers, right? Your team has a bunch of testers. You give them access to the development app. They make sure everything is right. And then what you would do is you would move all those reports in the production workspace, right? Move the completed ones to the production workspace and publish a production app from the production app workspace. So basically, it's just creating two workspaces and then moving content between them, right? And having an app from the development workspace and the production workspace for different purposes, okay? Today, the only way to do this is manually, right? You need to upload the PBX file to both the workspaces manually, which is slightly painstaking, but that's what exists. But next month, right, we are releasing some REST APIs to automate this process. So we are giving you an API to clone a report, and we are giving you an API to rebind the report to a new dataset. So here's what it means. You could have a development workspace with a development data set, right? It doesn't have to have any of the sensitive data. The prod workspace has sensitive data, right? But the schema is the same. So you could get a bunch of developers to develop on the development data, right? But only certain individuals with clearance will have access to both the production and the dev workspace, and they'll be able to move everything from the development workspace to the production workspace and rebind the reports to this new production data set, right? You'd be able to do that with the APIs. We are going to build more user interfaces on top of these APIs, but if you want to head start on this, this is what I was talking about earlier. In many of these cases, we are going to build APIs first, and we're going to open it up so you can start using them, and then we'll build our own user experience on top of these APIs. So this is one of the first that's coming out. It's going to come out for reports first. So if you're a report-heavy organization and you don't have a lot of dashboards, this will work perfectly for you coming out next month. Okay, not there yet, but it'll come out next month. We'll be announcing it soon. Okay, so the final thing I wanted to talk about, right? I have only like 4 minutes to go, is how you can measure your impact. We released a new feature called usage metrics for authors. How many of you tried it so far? Oh, nice. Let me switch back. Now I want to do a quick demo here. Oh, wait. Sorry. I switched faster than I thought. So inside your workspace, right, you can look at usage of any of the dashboards and reports in your workspace, right? There's a small button on the top. It's also on the content list. So you can just hit usage metrics. It spins a little bit, and the first time it takes some time to get the usage metrics, but you can get all the details about how consumers or how your end users are consuming the data in this report. And the cool thing is it's actually a data set behind the scenes, and you can customize it to your needs. You can just analyze it for your needs and drag and drop and create new visuals on top of it. So let me do a quick demo of that and show you how it works. Now I'm going to show you data that is obfuscated, but the trends have been preserved. This data is from our internal team. We have a sales analytics team, right? Now, this is not the actual workspace, but what they do is they have a home dashboard. I'm just showing you a mock of this. And they have a bunch of different reports, right, for different users. And the end users are the sales reps who consume it, and also telesales people, right? Now, they use usage metrics very, very successfully, and that's what I want to show you. What they did, so I already generated the usage metrics for their dashboard. So here's what they did. They are getting, here's the views per day. You get views per day of the particular dashboard, and this was their home dashboard, right? And then you get unique viewers per day. So the same viewer can view it multiple times, so you're getting unique viewers per day, and this is over a month. And you can slice and dice by saying, hey, how are my end users consuming it? So these guys had 2 content packs, right? And they also shared out the dashboard. And some people had access to the workspace itself. So they were using everything under the sun. And they could now slice it and say, hey, I just want to see if this content pack is actually being used, right? So in this case, the data should update soon. What happened here? Here you go. So they can just slice and dice the data and see how users are actually using the content in the data, right? Now, something interesting that you'll notice here is, let me select all. The usage went up, right? And this was around May 22. So here's what these guys did. The telesales team was not using it a lot, right? The other sales teams were using it, but the telesales team, they didn't care about it. So what these guys did is went and added some data that made the telesales person compete among themselves. So when they go in, they see how they compete with the team members on the number of calls they've taken and the number of, the number of leads they've picked up. So they put some data there and created some healthy competition. And after that, their end users started coming there every day to look at how they're doing. Hey, what's the ranking? And that's when the usage went up, right? So the viewers went up a little bit, but they were looking at it multiple times a day because this report was getting refreshed like 2 or 3 times a day. And they were really curious on how they were doing and whether they were beating out their teammates. So gamification worked pretty well there for that team, right? It's an interesting use case of how you can use usage metrics to figure out how to gain more adoption in your company and also figure out what your end users are using and how they're using it, right? You can also splice by platform, right? You can see whether they're consuming it in the web browser or the iPhone app, so that you can focus more on creating mobile-specific reports and dashboards. And here are the two interesting things, right? Total views rank and total viewers rank. We are gamifying the authors here. So what this tells me is this dashboard is the 18th most viewed dashboard across Microsoft, right? So I can compete with other content creators inside Microsoft. And many of our teams compete against each other. They want to be number one in terms of being consumed inside Microsoft. So that's some fun stuff there. Okay. I have one final thing to cover. I'm nearly running out of time. I just want to talk about the roadmap a little bit, right? So here's a few things we are going to improve with the apps. Most of the improvements are going to come to apps, as I mentioned. The first improvement is today apps have to be installed, right? I showed you get a link, or end users have to discover it. We are enabling the functionality for IT and the BI team to push an app directly to users, right? Not everybody will be able to do it. The IT admin has to give you the capability to push the app, or the Power BI admin has to give you the capability to push the app. Once you have that capability, so imagine a new salesperson joins the company, right? And one of the scenarios we get often is, hey, when he joins the company, we want him to see data that's pertinent to him, right? Automatically, without him doing anything. And you can achieve that with the first item. It'll automatically you just put a security group in there, and then say, hey, push this app to any member of the security group. So when a new person joins the security group, they get the app automatically the next time they come to Power BI. They leave the security group, the app gets automatically removed from them, right? So that's a cool feature that's coming up. The second feature is today, everything that's in the app workspace gets published as is, right? One of the top requests we get is, hey, I want to publish most of it, but I'm working on some of these dashboards or reports. Do not publish it, right? Until I'm complete. So I want to set states on it and say, hey, if I'm working on it, don't publish it. So we are adding that feature as well, which will let you say, hey, these are the dashboards that I do not want to publish everything else. Okay. External sharing of apps with premium. Many of you might have customers that are outside your organization that want to consume data from your organization. We are working on supporting Azure AD B2B. In plain terms, what it'll let you do is you can create an app, okay, and you can distribute it to any of our partners outside your organization. Here's the great thing about this: the licensing. You can buy the licenses for them, right? You can buy them a pro license. They can bring their own pro license, or if your app is in premium, they'll be able to consume it without any license. Okay, so it's the same licensing that applies within your organization that's going to apply outside your organization as well. So if you are a supplier and you have a bunch of clients and you don't want them to buy a license, you can either buy premium, they don't need a license, or you can buy pro licenses for them, and they don't need to buy a license either, right? So we are going to support all these licensing options for B2B. And then the next one is a very, very simple consumption-only view. That's what I was talking about earlier. You can turn off workspaces for a majority of your workforce. The final feature, we are starting to work on this. One of the reasons that people customize content packs and personalize content packs a lot is because of filters. When people, let's say you create a app for like your sales team, every salesperson that goes in has to set a filter for themselves, right? And every time they come in, they need to know to set that filter. Otherwise, it'd be useless to them. So in this case, what you can do is you can configure a bunch of personal filters for the users. The users configure it once, okay, and it's persisted throughout. So the custom filters for every user, that's what this is about, and we are going to start work on this very, very soon. Okay. So these are some of the roadmap items coming across distribution. Hopefully that was helpful. So we also give you feedback and all that, but one important thing is we released a deployment white paper as of yesterday, right? The product team wrote it with some of our MVPs. It's a very good white paper. So I highly encourage you guys to go read it if you end up deploying to a lot of users. It covers all the scenarios we talked about and goes into much, much greater depth in terms of the data, cleaning up the data, how you push the data, where you store the data. It goes into detail in every aspect that you want. So go take a read at it. I'll be at the Ask the Experts after the session. So if you have any questions about distribution and licensing, you can come and approach me. Thank you, guys.